This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation. Well, hello, everyone. We're so excited to launch our panel discussion series on topics that matter most to business and HR leaders. Today, we are starting with the topic of well-being at the individual, team, organizational, and societal level. We'll let our panelists introduce themselves in a moment, and we hope you enjoy this conversation.
Welcome, panelists.
I officially welcome you. You are our inaugural panel session for this series overall. So thank you for joining us. This topic that we've come together for, as we said in the pre-show, right, was that there is an overwhelming response and engagement to the topic of well-being. So we're opening it up. We know we'll have continued conversation about this, but this particular framing for our discussion today is well-being at the individual, team, organizational, and societal levels. So we could go lots of places, but what we recognize is that the importance is from the individual all the way through to society, right? So let's open up. If I could ask each of you to provide a short introduction of yourselves, the organization you're with, and a little bit about your background, and importantly, tying it to how you got to this passion of well-being. So Lesley, you're at the top of my screen here. So would you mind starting us off?
Sure. The Zoom bingo game, I know.
Yes, right.
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to be here with everybody today talking about well-being. My name is Lesley Page. I'm a professor of organizational leadership at Lewis University in the College of Business. My interest around well-being has probably developed over time, both from a personal and a professional level. I have always felt personally just the importance of well-being to balance me and my life, my family, my colleagues, my professional life as well. But also just seeing the growing trend highlighted by the pandemic, but certainly not, thrust forward, enhanced by it, but it was there all the time. I find myself really captivated by topics related to how leaders can help foster a climate or a culture that supports well-being and the struggle that exists in that space. And I love seeing the current trends that wellness is on more people's minds. But I know that we still have a long way to go in terms of understanding it, in terms of really building the support that we all need for it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Michele?
Hi, I'm Michele Kramer. I am a professor in the graduate nursing program at Lewis University, the track coordinator for the healthcare systems leadership track. But my background is definitely, besides having a variety of roles throughout my career, I've been a holistic nurse my entire career. And in fact, my psychology degree, my PhD is in transpersonal and humanistic psychology with a concentration in consciousness and spirituality. So when I look at well-being and health, I look at how well I've been able to weather the extreme changes that have taken place in my life, the constant change that took place, and really see wellness as a lifelong pursuit, as well as the fact of coming across recently, especially after the pandemic, listening to nurse leaders talk about how much they wanted to support their nurses and provided them with all kinds of resources and help, but the nurses didn't take advantage of it, which led me back to my original idea about looking at the consciousness of self-care and how we can create a lifelong sense of nurturing ourselves and what we can do that's more intrinsic motivated than the external motivation that tends to come from organizations and news and media. So how do we cultivate that stuff within?
Wonderful. Thank you. And would you just share briefly the research that the two of you have done together? I know we did a podcast highlighting that, but just introduce that research. I know you're continuing on with that research as well, I believe.
Yes, we've got an article. I think we're coming out. Our follow-up article is coming out in the June issue of Organization Development Review that we're hoping to have, that talked about checklists. But we've been fascinated with the idea of post-traumatic growth, the idea that through crisis, people don't have to necessarily just endure, and a lot of research has been done on resilience, but nobody really has looked at how organizations can go beyond keeping their talent resilient, but how they can actually thrive. Lesley, I'll let you take over from that with your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really fortunate to work with Michele and other colleagues at Lewis University on some really interesting research, as Michele was saying, talking about how organizations can kind of push through the resilience of the constant state of change that exists into the ability to thrive, to know that these major crises will happen, and in order to prepare ourselves, what will that take, and how can an organizational structure and the leaders within it help to support it. We've talked about things also in alignment around compassionate leadership and about wellness and growth. And so these topics are all interconnected. And as Michele said, it's really been a fascinating journey.
Which can segue very easily into wellness.
Yes,
that's right. And it segues into Jeremy's introduction, I believe. So you see why I set that up, Jeremy?
Goodness. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I get it. No, we're doing what you guys are talking about. So my name is Jeremy Vesta. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Curely. And I'll give you a little background, the genesis of where we came from. We had a very large manufacturing business with some union, some not, probably about 15,000 employees. Very high cost, Northeast Wisconsin, not exactly the healthiest area of the country. And we'd been very successful as a family business. We wanted to give something back. So we created kind of this partnership with the local hospital system that we were heavily embedded with, Aurora Baycare, and worked on kind of a concierge system. But out of that, we kind of thought, okay, what extra can we do? So we created this. We didn't really know what large case management was at the time, but we brought in a medical director and we brought in some nurses, and we kind of created a condition management system. But where it's different from what everybody else is doing is it's very relational based. We are in person with the people. We're meeting with them multiple times in a given month, spending hours with them depending on their risk. We're only going after the at-risk with this service. So we're not like trying to manage everybody in the population, although everybody could benefit. That's not the goal, but we're taking those marginal people. And what we've really codified is this system is about behavioral management and behavioral change. So you've got to get to know the person, develop the trust, and then after you've done all of that and set that baseline, then you can start to move the needle with their health. Because you're dealing with these marginal people. They're not engaged. They have collateral mental health issues. They are the margins of any society, any business population. And as a result, we've generated, 4-to-1 ROIs for our clients, massive reduction in the amount of large cases, reductions in the rates and amounts of diabetes in populations. Like for one example, one of our clients has an average population of, I believe, 47 years old. So very old population. And we've drastically reduced their large cases in diabetes, dealing with their hypertension, renal, cardiac, all of those things. But it doesn't start from focusing on the clinical. It starts from focusing on the person, the relationship, the trust. And that's what we've found is the key, is we can help you. And we can help these populations be more compassionate because they don't have the expertise. Their HR departments don't know what to do. But we can move that needle by forming relationships and earning people's trust and then providing our expertise.
You see that connection?
Sounds great. Yes.
We were strategic.
Well, but what really, I think, to underline this is there's often a great disconnect between the business case and the personal case.
Mhm.
And the alignment here is striking. If you go to the Curely website, it's almost all personal because that's what they're selling, this personal relationship with skilled people. And no matter how compassionate you are, it's not appropriate for you to ask the kind of questions you need to ask if you're a manager. And so saying you care is good, but it's not going to bring them somewhere. And so then you end up putting all the money in insurance companies or give them money for healthcare, which is okay. I'm not being negative about that. But the connection between the business case. So if you look at the website, it really only needs a half a page to make the business case, because in a way it's obvious, but we're not thinking about that. And so I just love that string from the business strategy to the people strategy, at which Adrian and I talk about all the time, talent optimization. And of course, if you have happy and engaged workers, it's going to make the societal impact in ways you'll never see. So I just think that's really exciting what you're doing there, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited about it. And just to bring up, one thing I had mentioned to Tom in the pre-call, what a cool thing for an employer who usually is the enemy of a lot of the population that works for them. It's just kind of like a necessary evil a lot of times. They get to say, hey, we hired in this group. And for example, we had an instance where somebody had a progressive tumor, I think stage 2 or stage 3 cancer, but it was very localized. And the current treatment was to keep them on kind of a maintenance chemo and basically wait it out. Very expensive, costing the plan, close to $500,000 a year. And basically this lady was going to die. So we got creative. We went to the HR department. We said, look, we've got an oncologist. It's out of network. Work with us on this. We think it's going to get a better result. We've seen the labs. We've seen the charts. We think there's a chance for an ablation. Got that person to go out of network, built the relationship, the trust to be able to migrate her to a new oncologist, which is a very difficult thing to do. People trust their doctors. They want to stay with their specialists. And there was nothing terrible about this oncologist, pretty decent oncologist, but not cutting edge. Moved to somebody that was top of class, got an ablation. That person is now in remission and back to work. And now that story filters throughout that population, that not only did this employer invest in something that cares about us, actually saved a life, like legitimately saved this life. This person wasn't even aware that this would be an option for their cancer case and is now in remission. Like that starts to filter through. You can imagine that doesn't just impact that person, that impacts everybody in the population from a well-being perspective. It's an uplifting thing.
There's two things that I love about that story, and just to help kind of tie a bow on that, because I do want to go up. I want to go up even higher, but it's relationships and right. It's relationships, and it's rethinking the programs that have been in place. Can we recognize that maybe they're not working, right? And so those are kind of the two underlines that I would make: relationships and just rethinking, just opening up our minds to think differently about the things that we know and trust, and then in their commonplace today. So, all right. So I want to go like way up, like let's start at the top with society, right? I'm going to hit you with some statistics. 30 million Americans don't have health insurance. It's hard to find a therapist these days because they're not taking new patients. 1 out of 4 workers can't take a sick day, and suicide rates are up. Now, not to be ho-hum, but what is going on? Right? What is going on? Michele, do you want to chime in on that thought first?
Are you asking a rhetorical question, or are you asking a question that may
How
have
did
an
we get
answer?
here? Right? How did we get here?
Well, I could go off on conspiracy theories, or I could go off on some other ideas, and the idea of what our health system has become, because it has become a business. And when you run a business, you don't necessarily, and the outcome of healthcare systems is supposedly wellness, right? Health.
Mhm.
But if there's a dollar attached to it, then it ends up getting manipulated, and you look at the supply and demand, and you look at return on investment. And individuals are unique, and their stories are unique. And Jeremy, what you were discussing was a new approach of looking at the uniqueness of each person's story and what will work for them. So you're de-standardizing standards that in a system, you're de-standardizing standards in a system that values standardization. And it tends to be more of dehumanizing, I think, is more of the problem. And the population has realized that it has no other place to go. So we're starting to see the unintended consequences.
Yeah, and it's fascinating just to jump off on that. Even the words we use when you're talking about HR benefits and the health plans provided, we talk about unit cost. We're so dehumanizing that we're literally reducing it down to units. And frankly, that's where all of the negotiation in your health plans happens. When your employer goes and they're we got this great deal that's going to save us a bunch of money. We're still going up with trend. We're not reducing health costs. But unit cost, the cost per each individual thing, each individual unit of care is going to go down. We're going to get discounts. We're going to get this. It all sounds great. Well, what's the health plan going to do? What's the health provider going to do? They still have the same beds, the same edifices, everything, the same doctor base. They're going to increase units. We're going to do more tests. We're going to send you to more specialists. We're going to refer at higher rates. And I think what's even more alarming in our system is, as you're talking about access to care, Adrian, and the lack of providers. Well, what are we filling them with? So we're hiring less qualified people because we have this out of control, in my mind, run of demand where we're increasingly unhealthy. Diabetes rates haven't gone down since the 1950s. They continue to increase every single year. It's not a surprise that we're outpacing, the medical capacity. So rather than decrease demand, which is what we're trying to do, we have this out of control demand, and you're hiring, nothing against these individuals. They're very highly trained. They work very hard, but like advanced practice nurses, nurse practitioners, things like that, to try to take on the care that they're very talented individuals, but they're not as qualified as maybe some of the medical professionals that would have otherwise been in place. So we've got this kind of problem where we're just outstripping our capacity year on year. We focus on the units, but we're not getting to the core, which is how do we not consume those units? And I love what you guys are getting at is let's be more well. That's how you solve the system, is by stripping units out of the economy. Don't consume the units and you won't have the problem.
Well, and Jeremy, you bring up a really interesting thought idea too, is that the paradigm that our healthcare system is one of curing, which is very linear, very left brain, and wellness to me really operates more in the healing paradigm, which is the right brain aspect of things, which is non-linear. As you were saying, Adrian, that their company's approach is non-traditional, it's non-linear. It's looking at how different pieces form a whole rather than breaking down the whole, thinking that it's going to explain, breaking them down into parts that they think will explain the whole, which it doesn't.
I mean, it's so interesting too, because we see, as you were mentioning, we have some issues, especially in the US when it comes to our healthcare system. And so when you think about the number of people who are without health insurance, due to cost, due to lack of access, there's lots of reasons why it's in some instances more of a privilege. That's a whole nother conversation probably. But we see that happening at the same time as this really intense explosion of talking about mental health and well-being. And so at the same time, there's sort of like the destruction of what's going on in terms of the support system and how well that is able to address the human need. However, the human need is being magnified, always having been there, but more on the topic of frequent discussions. People are more comfortable talking about mental health. They're more comfortable talking about well-being. It's something that's, I see it like with students who are just really comfortably talking about, well, yeah, that's what my therapist had recommended my approach be, or just with friends or colleagues where 10 years ago, I don't think that we were quite so open about it. So there's kind of this, unevenness there. The other thing that you said that really struck me as interesting, I was reading Corporate Wellness Magazine put out a top employee well-being trends for 2024. And one of the things that they mentioned was the use of basically AI-driven bots to provide service. So just adding that into this conversation around like, are there qualified individuals to provide services? People aren't able to secure a slot with a therapist when needed. So now we have like chatbots to help people. Maybe at a surface level, that's help for some people who are feeling so isolated that is a step. But like, where's the progression of that and where is that headed?
Yeah,
let's strip out
is our companies. The management theory grew out of a linear mechanical structure that was about units in motion, and thought leaders were addressing this in the 70s, but the reality still exists. A linear, not a systemic approach, not a holistic approach. We're more aware of it, but as Jeremy said earlier, how aware of it and what you're actually doing can differ. And political structures are similar. So that would be at the societal level, very fragmented. And so you can have in Washington, D.C., kitty corner across from each other, a group of the Surgeon General saying smoking is damaging, and then kitty corner is a government taxpayer thing to say, how can we support the tobacco farmers? And there's nobody saying, wait a minute, what is the whole asking for? I mean, that's true. I didn't make that up. They are literally kitty corner. And they're focused all day on helping tobacco farmers, and they're focused all day on getting people to stop smoking. So really, we need to look at this, zooming out to societal level and then zooming down to the individual person that needs a nurse. And I just like this integrated approach.
Yeah, it does highlight some of the kind of contradictions there, going back to what Jeremy said. And, some Michele and I presented at a conference last fall on the topic of compassionate leadership and making what we thought a pretty compelling argument for how leaders can play a very important role to kind of be empathetic, to be caring, to help employees. And we had somebody in our audience say, that sounds pretty interesting, but I can't imagine how I could really talk to my employees that way. Like, how do we develop that comfort level? I think, Jeremy, to your earlier point, where we know that might be a good thing to do. And when the workplace and hiring top talent is very competitive, I've mentioned to, Adrian and Tom, like, this is a real opportunity for leaders to shine right now, to do great things. But that's really hard. And not everybody is skilled or comfortable to talk to employees in a way that is at that personal of a level. So I just see like there's all sorts of contradictions when we look at it like real big picture, and then we try to bring it back down to the human level. A lot to make sense of there.
Well, and when you're looking at size, so I think you make an awesome point there. There's diseconomies of scale. My background was an economics major, and that's kind of where I branch off. And I've worked in some very large companies. I'm currently working as head of, a very small family-owned business where I know everybody in our organization, and I can have that personal human touch. Back to the AI thing. Could we strip out any more of the human touch and think that people are going to psychologically get better, right? And not that there's not a role in terms of decision making and things like that AI can help. It's a wonderful tool, but you got to use it as a tool. We're still humans interacting, but the diseconomies of scale from a human perspective as you get in a large corporation, okay, those leaders do not have the time, resources to be able to invest in all of those people. So what do you have to do? You got to take a product like ours and make it easy. Hey, you're going to hire us. We know you can't do it. Let us care for your people the way you can. Because I tell you what, if you try to care for your people and you put in a wellness program, you give speeches, you do whatever, and it's not authentic, everybody in your culture is walking away from you. In our experience from managing some very large corporations, the minute your employees get a whiff of inauthenticity, now you're getting into turnover issues. Now you're getting into people that don't care to work for you anymore. They know you don't care about them. You're viewing them as a cost. And that's the danger in a lot of wellness programs from a corporate perspective anyway, is that, okay, how do we push this without it being overt that basically what we're saying is our healthcare costs are out of control. They went up 8% last year, and we don't know what to do because we know nothing about the system. Our HR team has no expertise in reviewing claims. We can't get into the weeds from a HIPAA perspective. It's just a black box that we just keep throwing money into. But if you hire in a service that has the ability to be very authentic, form those relationships, and legitimately, I'm not saying this is hyperbole, legitimately caring for those people to bring them along, now all of a sudden the pressure's off. Okay, we'll bring whatever resources we need to bring to make sure the job gets done effectively, to make sure that the people get the attention they need. You don't have to worry about it at all. And oh, by the way, now they don't need to worry about the fact that they're only getting 5 minutes with their doctor, because we're spending an hour and a half with them a week from now to go over what their doctor said. And we even love to extend it beyond that, because now you take it into the care system. We go to the appointment sometime with the participant to see the doctor. We're not trying to provide care, but we convince that physician, hey, you've got a care plan you'd like to give this person. We realize you've given up. This guy's got a BMI of 41. He's heavily diabetic. He's got hypertension. You're just going to medicate him to keep him alive. But what would your ideal care plan be instead of the one you currently have in place? And let us have a chance to see if we can get him to adhere to the care plan you'd like to give. And all of a sudden you've flipped everything.
Well, and Jeremy, you are creating a product. I hate to use that. Probably it feels better to you if I say word product rather than you're creating an opportunity for leadership and organizations to really provide what they're supposed to about wellness. And that's creating the space and the openness for a healthy work environment. And if they are not capable, or the organization is so large that it can't find a way to do it in a non-traditional way, bringing in your services contributes to creating that nurturing space. I guess.
Well, I think it goes beyond just providing the space, because the people that we're really dealing with that are the large spenders, the real large cases, they are hidden away in the corporation or even in the small company. They're not participating in the wellness group. They're heavily depressed. They're not seeking care. Maybe they have socioeconomic issues. Maybe they have issues at home. They're not comfortable talking about with anybody in the company. And so it's like the space can be provided, but if nobody's actively reaching out to those people, we select them and we actually go at them. So we're almost like a cold call center. We're trying to reach out to them.
I'm not disputing that. What I guess what I'm trying to say is that by bringing you in, you've provided an opportunity for you to find those, but it still all goes back to the human connection.
Absolutely. So our job is then to convince these people that don't want to join any programs to participate. And that's the hardest step. Once we've broken down the barriers, our nurses show unbelievable love for these people, and then quickly then they latch on because they've been looking for that human interaction. It's what you guys are saying. They're looking for that that positive human experience that they're not getting, and that's why they are where they are. They're not there because they want to be obese or diabetic or hypertensive. But they've developed these habits as coping mechanisms that have gotten and spiraled and snowballed and have gotten to them to where they are. And somebody's got to stop that cycle and show them that they're loved, show them that they're cared for, and bring them out of it.
And I'd argue
really
that
interesting to think about. Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian.
No, go ahead, Leslie.
Oh, I mean, it just, as you said that, I was thinking, yeah, I mean, just the shift of being, proactive instead of reactive is all the difference, right? People who just need somebody to say, hey, I'm noticing you. And, there might be something that our organization can do, a service we can provide, support we can provide, medical care we can provide. But not easy. I mean, it's a cultural shift. It's a mindset shift for many people. Again, I kind of wonder, how will that change as newer generations of employees come into our organizations that are much more in tune and much more interested in taking care of their health? People who are looking for work-life balance, people who are looking for mental, health options and opportunities, let alone physical health options and opportunities too. Adrian, I'm sorry, we spoke at the same time.
I think we similar thoughts. I see it as there's an advocacy, right? There, and I think the responsibility, or maybe that's too strong of a word, but there's an opportunity to show that advocacy both in the programs that are provided through the organization, but also with that leader, right? Because it has to be more than, I'm a manager, I recognize there's something, with one of my employees, and I say, hey, there's an EAP program that we provide, right? It's more than that. It's, and there's now this gray area of, where's the line of, I'm a leader and I care and I'm meant to care and I believe in caring, but yet I'm still that person's manager, and so where is that? And I think leaders struggle with, how much do I show that I care? How much do I encourage or probe, right? And still encourage and advocate for the programs that are in place, and hopefully they're good ones, like what Jeremy's company is providing, right? So that there's that connection. But I still think that there's the opportunity with the leaders to make that human connection and support that.
I came across some interesting information that talked about how the sort of historical perspective of, treating well-being, when we think about things like work-life balance, which has been a topic in, corporations for a long time, or to your point, Adrian, around, EAPs and available resources, but not generally very utilized. And then this article I was reading talked about more, kind of modern movements toward, mindful leadership. Even having like a mindful manager checklist is something that they talked about that kind of struck me as interesting, and just opening up the opportunity for leaders to develop some of those skills. I don't think that it will ever replace the kind of connection, Jeremy, that you're talking about, because that's so necessary on a very in-depth one-by-one basis. But Adrian, to your point, as a leader of, employees, is there still something that can be done at that level? And I think that there probably is, at least growing research showing us that being more mindful can kind of help to build the foundation of that relationship, to make it a little bit more comfortable to talk about what help might be needed. And that could look, very different depending on each employee.
I think from a business owner's perspective, if I could rebrand what you're saying, I think what you're saying is culture matters a lot. So, the work-life balance is kind of a tricky topic from perspective of a business owner, because I still need my people to be there. I still need them to be productive. I think the bigger issue is getting real productivity out of your people. And if you have a culture, I think we've all worked in organizations that have great cultures, and it's fun to work there. You really love the people you're around. And so working a 12-hour day all of a sudden becomes very easy. Whereas we've also worked in situations where working 4 hours a day is like a living hell and you want to get anywhere else, right? You're just looking for reasons to leave. You're not getting your work done. Those cultures, they're having to hire multiples of people because they're not getting the work done, right? So even in an 8-hour day, those people are not getting they're producing at the rate that they should be producing, getting the work done, being collaborative, being creative. And then when you get into the typical discussion of work-life balance, you're saying, okay, well, let's give them some flex hours, or let's, maybe we can give them, Fridays, half days in the summertime or something like that. You've just compounded the issue because your culture sucks. So you haven't solved the issue. Now you're going to have to hire even more people because the work still has to get done. Your cost
Gave everybody
of
Friday
business,
off.
yeah, your overhead just went up, and now you're looking at in potential leaner times, which, hey, we might be headed towards economically. Now you're going to have layoffs, and now the stress is even higher. So it almost works counterintuitively from a business structure. So what you really got to focus on is, if you want work-life balance to function, you've got to have a strong culture where people actually enjoy being there. It's got to be authentic, a culture of humility, something that makes people feel comfortable and enjoy being at work. We still want to make sure we're not taking up all of their time, that they have time for their families and things like that. But the quality of time, I think, is every bit as important as the amount of time.
Well, I'm not seeing work-life balance being used anymore. What I'm seeing more is well-being,
Right.
and engaging and nurturing and having meaning and mattering. The Center for Positive Psychology the University of Pennsylvania has done a lot of research on and work on what creates a thriving person, a person who ends up being healthy. When you're happy and engaged and motivated, then you're more productive, as you say, Jeremy. You don't need external motivation to be productive, and the quality of work improves. So being engaging, finding ways to engage them, I think, and finding ways to nurture, and the well-being, those are those key terms I see being used much more often than work-life balance anymore, because there are people who would put in 24 hours of meaningful work if it meant something to them, and yet their life might not be the same, but it also is an ebb and flow. There's a rhythm to people's lives. But I was also going, as you were talking, both Lesley and Jeremy, also I was thinking about one of the challenges that Lesley and I have had, especially since the pandemic, is that we do a lot of online teaching. And when you lose the human connection of face-to-face interaction, there has to be another way to find how do you engage them. And so I don't know, I've done a lot of research on it, especially because of my holistic background and knowing that the energy field interaction is very important, especially when you're talking about brainstorming and ideas. And all of us know the difference between an in-person team meeting and a virtual team meeting. And so then it's the quest for how do we engage. And one of the things that I have found in my classwork when I'm working synchronously online with them is starting to ask them about their lives, getting to know them, asking questions that starts the conversation going between everybody who's talking. Little things like, what was the most important thing that happened to you this week? That gets conversations going, and then they start becoming more animated. And so I'm not looking at black boxes without getting any kind of interaction. And then they become excited, because then you also give them choices as to what kinds of assignments are meaningful for them. I found that works very well too. So when you can find things that are meaningful for people, and that again goes back to that one-on-one identification and that relationship that you're building, and it's as if you turn on a switch. or at least I imagine that.
Yeah.
What you both mentioned, around culture, I think is so true. And we hear a lot around, belonging, which I think cannot be underestimated. So I agree with what you were both saying. And hopefully that was just reiterating, like kind of the historical perspectives. Work-life balance isn't really where people are at when we're trying to figure out how to manage our day or our excitement or our intrinsic desire to work. But creating a sense of belonging it lets us bring our unique selves to work. We feel appreciated when we're there for being our unique self. We feel comfortable in our work life. Then we want to do more. I continually tell students when I'm teaching, people come to work to add value, and then they come to work to be valued. And so finding that balance is so true, and striking that, then we make it an environment or a culture where people want to do more and have an opportunity to thrive, which, to both of your points, can lead to all sorts of positive outcomes.
And this
these are enduring.
conversation has highlighted, when we did our topics, we had well-being and engagement, because together, you may or may not have noticed it, but we're going to do a separate conversation on engagement. It fits here because obviously if we're not well, we're not engaged, but there's more dimensions to it that we can't explore today. All of you can address it, and really coming back to that research on thriving, if we're not connected, they're all interrelated. So we're back to holistic, and one impacts the other, and you don't know where the lines are. But we need to have a conversation about, and Adrian and I always talk about people strategy aligned to business strategy, but without using business buzzwords, it's just this idea that we want to thrive as organizations, as individuals, as teams, and societies. And we aren't currently, and culture is the way we behave, but that's driven by our underlying philosophy. But it's ultimately this group of people, this family behaves this way. And circling back to what Jeremy said is, we can talk about it, but what are you doing? Because what you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. So I just think this is a wonderful conversation, and it is going to be continued, but we're running out of time. So we go back to Adrian gets to ask one more question. And that's, I always have to be the bad guy that says we're out of time. Oprah's coming in 10 minutes and we can't have her.
Well, everything you were sharing made me think of purpose and the alignment of purpose between the employee and the company they're working for. And I think when you have that, there's harmony. And I think that's where you're willing as an employee to over deliver, right? Versus over service, which I see as being I'm told to do this, I'm asked to do this, and I feel like I'm giving more than I'm getting back. But if you're feeling that connection and that alignment, you're giving almost from your heart, right? So you're willing to over deliver because now you are engaged, not to get into that topic, but you are engaged in the giving of what the company is giving to the world, right? And to me, that's the tie-in. So, all right, I will end with one question, and this will bring us down more to the individual level. So purpose kind of being a little bit of a tie-in, but what can we do for our own self-care? And I'll challenge that response by, how is it an internally driven self-care? So let's not talk about kind of this faux self-care of, well, make sure you meditate and go for a walk and those sorts of things. But how can we pay attention to our self-care in ways that are more of our internal decisions? Any thoughts?
Sure.
Is it a zinger?
I think one of the things that's absolutely lacking in our corporate cultures is a development of soft skills. And I think from a personal perspective, the more you can develop those soft skills where you're where you are focused on engaged listening, focus on the other person, a sense of humility, a sense of authenticity. If you can work through some of your own personal insecurities, when you're in that environment, no matter how stressful it is, you'll learn how to better metabolize that stress. You won't turn it into the problems that Curely's coming in to help you get rid of. And you really need to have that support system around you, but it starts with your individual decisions. You got to take responsibility that, okay, somebody can be very upsetting or very disruptive at work, but that doesn't have to be you. And chances are everybody else in that work environment, they're not thrilled to be engaging with that individual either. And you don't commiserate, you don't try to build on that, but develop your own soft skills, just like going to the gym and weight training, develop your ability to handle those situations in a healthy manner and respond, in my opinion, with humility and with care.
I like that. Michele, Lesley.
I think that there's a really powerful inner dialogue that we have, which perhaps gets to what you're talking about as well, Jeremy. So I think understanding what we can do to support ourselves. And I'm trying to avoid the kind of pitfalls you were just saying, Adrian, not like the meditation and the yoga and taking a walk, although I think those things are all really good advice for people. But it does go a little bit beyond that. I mean, we first off, I think, have to recognize that we might want to face and approach our own well-being, right? So nothing will happen if we're not willing to see it. But if we are, then kind of how can our internal dialogue help to build confidence, help to build our own personal support system? So we can recognize that that person at work who maybe said something that was really triggering, we have a way to just let that roll. Right? Like we don't have to be, disarmed by every move around us, that we just have the strength to continue because our internal dialogue is one that's sharing, pride in ourselves and support for ourselves.
Well, and that internal dialogue leads me into what I was going to say, Lesley, and that was how important our consciousness is for being able to direct what we do and how we perceive things, and using consciousness as a tool, and then using other tools along with consciousness. So one of the tools I developed, because I'm a big fan of the rule of three, is the conscious pattern of recognizing what's going on with ourselves, what's going on inside, outside ourselves, reflecting. I call it the 3 R's: reflecting about what it means, what's going on, what needs to be done, how do I want to go about doing things, and responding, which means what am I going to do about this? And this is where Jeremy's company would come in terms of this may be one of the solutions that would help me to do that. But really helping people just get into that flow of recognize, reflect, respond.
Wonderful responses. And none of us, you didn't tell us to take a walk, unless you're taking a walk
respond choice
to reflect.
Yes.
Right?
We're still going to tell you to take a walk at some point. Yes.
Yeah, right. but to what end, right? I feel like those recommendations are so that we can quiet our minds, really, right? For that reflection. Yeah. Tom, you want to bring us home?
Well, I have to piggyback on Lesley, and I guess Michele did too. The core of my coaching work is installing the inner CEO. That's the highest version of yourself. And what does a CEO do? She connects to the vision. She allocates resources. She continuously realigns. And most of us, and I'm looking right at my tile intentionally, are not consciously aware of a lot of the inner conversations that are dragging us down. And then we're trying to make that inner CEO shine in the world instead of processing the inner brats. Oh my gosh, we got a new visitor at the end. Must have been a time zone thing, but we'll say hello. And so I just want to thank everybody from coming from their own perspective and yet touching on all of the things that we all care about. We must have, Dr. Natasha, we must have mixed up the time zone or something. The good news for you is we have a part 2 on well-being. So just say hello to everybody for now.
Hello.
Bring it home, Natasha.
Bring it home, Natasha.
So my question was something like, because it's not actually written, so I'll paraphrase, but something along the lines of, what can we do as individuals to self-care for ourselves, and without artificial answers like take a walk and yoga and essential oils and those sorts of things, right? I took all that off the table. So what else can we do? Right.
I love this question. It's one of the most important things that I speak on and that I share, because I learned it the hard way from.
We all learn the hard way.
From the burnout of being in practice at some point for neglecting self-care. And one of my favorite tools that I love is I still keep a paper calendar, like an appointment schedule, because I can look at the entire week and a month, and I block out the times. I also block out 15 to 30 minutes before and after every appointment, every activity, everything I'm doing. And part of that self-care allows for time, not just time if I'm driving and time to get there, but time to just feel into, and like, what did I just do? How did that go? How did that feel? And allows my mind to shift into, well, what am I doing next? But it also really allows me to see the entire calendar week so that I can start to see, okay, if there's 2 or 3 days or 4 days that really is heavy loaded and appointments and activities, then I already know in my mind, like by day 4, I'm going to need to lighten that load for myself. And so I will intentionally go, okay, well then day 4, I'll make sure to have my workout planned and allow myself the chance to, I'll sleep in either I sleep in, or at least I can wake up and not have to go anywhere. And that just allows my mind to know, oh, hey, no matter how busy or what's happening, there's always, like, by day 4, because that's my natural rhythm, to say, okay, well, it's already scheduled. So I schedule space in my calendar, space between activities and space in between, about 3 days worth by the 4th day, and I'll do a half day. And then in the course of a month, I may have 2 or 3 weeks that are heavy loaded, but I always build in the 4th week to have a half week. And that way I can pick up and do like administrative work and putz around and clean my house and just water my flowers, and that allows the self-care that's already built in, just like I would schedule everything else.
That was a great summation of Michelle's model of.
I thought that too. Consciousness starts with awareness and making space for what matters most. Yeah.
Yes. Well, wonderful. So we hate to wrap up as soon as you've joined, but we will invite you back for our continued conversations. And Lesley, Michele, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a wonderful inaugural panel discussion. We look forward to more. We look forward to you joining conversations in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.